And we'll be moving on now to the Dark Lance. Now, the Dark Lance is similar to construction to the Eldar Bright Lance, but its redesign allows it to use dark light ammunition. The dark light ammunition is accelerated very rapidly down the barrel by containment fields. Upon making contact with the target, it reacts very violently, tearing through armor regardless of thickness or composition. And in the event of Dark Lance's use on infantry, it's incredibly rare that any sign of the unfortunate target is left.
Okay, so I kept reading and trying to figure out what dark light is, and dark light is also referred to as dark matter. There isn't a lot of data to go off with this weapon beyond that, but apparently it hurls dark matter at a target. Let me emphasize this right now. Dark matter is a term we use to refer to matters of the universe and physics that make no sense to us with the current theories involving space, gravity, or time. It is not something we truly understand, and certainly not something we have theorized that could be made into a weapon, nor is it a material said to interact violently with anything, considering the interactions we describe when referring to dark matter is how gravity doesn't behave correctly, or, quote, correctly, or how planets shift, or how comets move in irregular patterns that they should not be able to based on gravity and physics. Every day there is a research paper published that discovers some aspect that we thought was dark matter to prove it's not dark matter, and some other natural phenomenon. Dark matter, to myself, as well as to 3 different physicists at Rutgers, is basically the boogeyman of physics.
That's a good term for it.
This weapon is pure science fiction. There will never, at least in our current understanding of how the laws of physics work, be something that uses dark matter as a weapon.
So purely science fiction for the moment.
For the moment, this weapon is purely science fiction and purely just made up off the top of your head. I can't even call it theoretical because
Hypothetical?
Hypothetical is a good term.
Okay. So we'll move on then to the Pulse Disintegrator. Now these weapons are generally mounted upon vehicles and fire rapid pulses of unstable subatomic matter to vaporize their target. Now unlike the crude plasma weapons of primitive races, Dark Eldar disintegrators are able to maintain a high rate of fire without overheating.
Okay, so I did the research and this is not a plasma weapon. Plasma would have made this so much more feasible. But it seems like Games Workshop is incredibly fascinated with subatomic particles that people don't quite understand can't really be used as a weapon. Let's put some basic knowledge of how subatomic particles work and how atomic particles in general work to this. You take a ball of subatomic particles that are unstable. They will seek to become stable. Unless they are purposely being kept unstable, but as soon as the instability elements are removed from their environment, they will seek to become atomic particles, or atoms, in order to become stable. This is how the universe works. This is how atoms build upon atoms, how compounds become compounds, and how compounds become things we actually touch. Firing a mass of subatomic particles at someone and hoping it will do damage to them wouldn't really work unless the particles were in some way made to be unstable even after they left the gun. And if you're firing a mass of unstable subatomic particles at someone, I would have imagined that would be the basis for the theory of a fission reaction or an atomic bomb, not to be confused with an H-bomb. This much said, a Dark Eldar's Pulse Disintegrator wouldn't work as a weapon. I'm sorry to all the Eldar fanboys, but here's what would happen. Say you have a chunk of unstable mass being kept as unstable as long as it remains in the antechamber, keeping it that way. But as soon as it's released at a near incomprehensible rate, those subatomic atoms will begin to trade parts, combining to make full atomic atoms. It's how subatomics work in reaction to each other. The weapon would fire, you get a bright flash of light, and then likely traveling at high speed, you would end up with balls of hydrogen and helium, the two most common lightest elements in the galaxy. These two elements would be completely harmless at the high temperature, would dissipate in seconds from the reaction that caused them to be formed in the first place. within about 50 to 100 meters of the point of firing, the weapon is now just flinging very high velocity hydrogen gas at someone. This is why we don't panic or are not super worried about a containment breach at the subatomic colliders in, say, the UK or at Harvard, because a breach will likely not cause the end of the world. It'll just cause a temporary addition of hydrogen, helium, nitrogen, or some other very light gas element to the atmosphere that will be balanced out as soon as it finds something that has the opposite charge. This literally is not a weapon that makes sense in the realm of physics. Sorry.
So, going on to something that's actually a bit more practical, the Clave. Now, the Clave is a melee weapon favoured by the Incubi over any other. It is a perfectly balanced blade that's got an additional handle and can be used, due to its own power weapon nature, to cleave through Space Marine power armor.
This is an extremely flexible close combat weapon with multiple grips that allows its wielder to adapt to very different styles on the fly. I have nothing against this weapon whatsoever. It's basically the same bladed clave weapon we see today. This has been honed over the centuries to be designed to be better and better throughout human history. Simply put, there is no more effective or efficient design for this weapon, nor is there any real fault with this weapon, other than the fact it has the same problem as all bladed weapons: range on a battlefield full of guns. The weapon.
True, but if you manage to close distance though and manage to whip that out, it's going to end the fight very quickly.
It's going to be very effective. Claves are generally one of the very effective close combat weapons. They can be used as lighter versions of lances. They can be used as great swords, and they can be used as kind of a staff spear hybrid. So, I mean, we've used them for centuries. There's nothing to add here. I don't really. They've been honed that way to be an amazing design, and there's simply, at some point, there's no way you can improve upon a bladed weapon design.
Fair enough. Okay, next we have Ghostplate armor. Now, Ghostplate armor is typically worn by Archons who wish to combine substantial protection with greater mobility. The armor itself is fashioned from hardened resins containing pockets of lighter-than-air gases, and also incorporates mini forceful generators for additional protection.
So, I don't have much on the force fields, but I can tell you this. This type of protection is a form of offense against the attacker at close range, as the pockets of air are pressurized according to lore, meaning that not only does this provide spaced armor, so that when something such as a shaped charge hits the target and detonates, it has to pass through a pocket of air, thereby drastically reducing its damage. I'm looking at you, Bolter. It also means that it has a form of explosive reactive armor. This form of ERA upon an infantryman is not, however, going to have an explosion that's going to harm the person wearing it. So basically, when you penetrate the upper layer, you're going to get a explosive release of pressurized air, which is going to throw off any melee combatant by throwing their arm and weapon for a ride. It's literally going to be like getting hit with a high-powered pressure hose. Other than that, it offers the same level of protection as Calibite armor, and I think this is a wonderful, awesome idea. Why haven't we done this?
We might do in future, we never know.
True.
Okay, moving on to a bit of a dirty weapon now, the Hex Rifle. Now, the Hex Rifle is used primarily by the homunculi, which uses crystal cylinders that contain a small amount of glass plague virus. The glass plague virus is a virus that turns the victim's molecular composition into that of crystal, turning it into essentially a glass statue.
Okay, so this is going to require a very complicated understanding of chemistry and biology, as well as atomic properties. The Hex Rifle turns a living creature based on carbon, because research into the 40k universe indicates that every single living creature in the 40k universe is based on carbon, into a silicate, i.e. silicone. First of all, I'm going to point out the glaring flaw with this weapon. It would kill everyone! The wielder included. Such a weapon turns an Imperial Guardsman into diamond or a glass statue in roughly 11 seconds. This is done via delivery of airborne spores. Viruses use our DNA to replicate themselves and multiply, creating more and more of the viral compound till they are either destroyed by our antibodies or they kill us and find a way to spread their spores to the next host. This means after the first burst from this weapon, one person would die between 6 to 11 seconds. Everyone within 24 meters of range of the initial impact of the weapon would then be infected as well. Within 1 hour, over 200 square kilometers would be infected and dead. The virus is shown to be completely indiscriminate between sentient life and plant life as well. Within 2 days, depending upon population density, an entire planet the size of Earth would literally be annihilated and turned into a giant field of glass. Since the virus has a 100% infection and kill rate. Literally means that firing this weapon is basically ending not only the planet, but the Dark Eldar army using it. You were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, you can't deny its effectiveness then, really, can you, in a way?
No.
When you possibly have to kill every single motherfucker in the room.
This
or the planet.
Is insane. Now, I'm going to go over the process that would be required to turn a carbon-based life form into gas. For a start, I don't think this is actually turning them into glass. I think it's turning them into artificial diamond. Because that would be the only thing that makes sense, since carbon and silicone have no possibility of any way of combining to form a compound, much less being turned into each other without completely breaking them apart at the subatomic level and recombining them under controlled environmental circumstances, something a virus cannot actually achieve. To illustrate how crazy this would be, it would be like I am attempting to bake cookies and I pull refined steel bars out of the oven instead.
That certainly would be interesting if nothing else.
So instead, it is in fact turning the carbon-based life form, since we know carbon can be turned into diamonds, into diamond. Very brittle flash diamonds, normally used for such as the industrial type, or used for artificial diamonds that, we don't really value that much for some reason. So, how does this happen? The virus is using our body as a chamber, since our body can create airtight and watertight chambers, and uses this to create the pressure at an extremely fast rate and effective enough to turn us into artificial and very brittle diamonds. This effect would be extremely painful, but it would happen so quickly your nervous system wouldn't have time to register the pain. It is the same process again that we use industrial explosives in order to create artificial diamonds for mining or cutting glass. This means the virus applies 725,841 pounds per square inch to our body in an extreme method of super compression, causing the cells to rapidly change into diamonds. In addition to this, it would need to apply 1747 degrees Kelvin of heat and the pressure at the same time over the course of 0.2 nanoseconds to every cell in our body.
Jesus. That's insane.
All of this would have to happen in order to not disintegrate the target or simply turn them into a crushed bit of meat puppet. The process would be so quick and sudden you would not even realize what had happened until you had turned into a statue. And in a brief flash of light distortion, a carbon human would be turned into a diamond statue. At the very least, you'll live forever because diamonds are forever, or you'll end up as one of two things: an ash statue blown away in a cartoon comical fashion by a gust of wind, or a very finite and very tender pile of meat salad pasta sauce.
What would you rather end up as?
None of the above, please. But this is... If the virus is actually capable of doing this, That's insane. Can we please have other applications for it? Please?
Maybe if you find a world that's very primitive and just drop the virus on the planet, turn it all into diamond, and then you can just harvest diamonds. And look, everybody wants to be rich.
Exactly! More practical purpose! Instead of, bang! Whoops, I just killed you, myself, and everyone else on this planet. My bad!
That's the point. If the Imperium get hold of it, they can use that to perform exterminatus on some small Xenos species and then harvest things to sell. There you go, job done. Get some money as well.
Go for it, you genocidal maniacs.
Okay, and the final weapon we're going to be looking at today is the Heat Lance. Now, Heat Lancers are used primarily by Reavers and Scourgers. It is considered to be a great technological breakthrough, as Comorites have managed to combine the power of Melter and high-yield las weaponry into one. And as with every Melter weapon, the Heat Lance has a short range but is extremely devastating.
Okay. The Heat Lance, we've already gone over Melta weapons in the previous episode. Please go look at the Imperial Guard episode in order to understand how Melta weapons actually work. But combining them with lasers, I have to say this. This, using the laser's polarity to create a magnetic field of light, would actually be able to keep the Melta weapon stable and therefore double its range.
So even though it's still going to have a relatively short range compared to most weapons, it's going to be double that of other Melta weapons.
Yes. Great job, Dark Eldar. That is actually ingenious. I personally would have never thought to put a laser field through a Melta beam, because I wouldn't have thought it would have done anything until I did the research and then went, oh, you're actually creating a magnetic field to keep the Melta beam stable for longer. Nice.
So all in all, how have the Dark Eldar weapons fared today compared to the other races we've looked at?
They have giant shotguns, virus weapon that basically says if I ever pull the trigger, I'm screwing everyone. And a bunch of stuff that basically is completely and utterly science bollocks.
And that awesome armor as well that can just go boom when someone punctures it.
Yes, yes. Their armor's really nice. Like, Ghostplate armor is really, really nice. And it seems like it would be simple to make, so I don't understand why more Dark Eldar troops don't have it. But the most of the weapons I can't stand by them at all. They either are way too potent in terms of what they're capable of killing, or they're simply utter silliness that doesn't exist in the realm of physics.
So essentially it's either overkill or complete uselessness. There's no in between.
Pretty much. I think the only exceptions are the Splinter Rifle and the Agonizer, and the Agonizer is just a fancy taser, and the Splinter Rifle's like, I have an idea, let's hand all of our troops punt guns! They won't have to aim very well, just in the general direction of the guy, and go, screw you and everyone in that direction.
Fair enough then. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up this edition of Men at Arms. Join us next time where we'll be looking at the weaponry of the Forces of Chaos. This has been Remleiz with 40k Theories.
This has been Fiaura, and I heart next time because I get to look at Sonic cannons.
And we'll see you all again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.